So as Sue introduced, I am Jamie Lane. My role I'll go into in a few minutes and just explain a little bit about who I am, my background, and what my role is, and why I'm here today to talk to you about business partnering. First of all, we'll just run through kind of what the agenda is so that you're clear on what we're going to expect today. We're going to go through three questions, core questions, which is, what is business partnering? You may be familiar with the term. It has a bit of history in perhaps different industries outside of safety, so we'll talk a little bit about that, what the purpose of it is. We'll talk about what makes a great business partner. So if you are looking to move into a business partnering role or it's something that interests you, we'll talk about the skills and attributes that a business partner should have. We'll also look at what it looks like in practice. So what are the signs of success and how to tell what a business partner is versus, say, a manager or an advisor within the safety or risk function. And then we've left quite a bit of time at the end for questions. So as Sue said, pop it in the chat. Sue is going to facilitate that at the end, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you do have. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, just to kind of introduce myself. So as Sue said, I work for Sainsbury's, which for those of you not based in the UK is a large supermarket. We are an omni-channel retailer. So that's a fancy way of saying that we sell things in lots of different ways. We have the Sainsbury's business, which is supermarket, Argos, which is a catalogue retailer, our traditional catalogue retailer. The catalogue doesn't exist anymore. We have convenience stores, superstores, and we operate in mainly the UK, but we also operate in the Republic of Ireland in our Argos business. So my role as Group Safety Business Partner, what does that actually mean? Well, I've been doing this role now for 6.5 years, and for the first year, I wasn't very sure because business partnering in safety was a new concept to me. So I'm going to kind of talk through today a bit about my journey and how I found business partnering to work. Maybe tell you some of the lessons I learned along the way of how not to do things. But one of the reasons why my role is a business partner is because I business partner with 7 people. So these 7 people are senior leaders within our business. They manage a large geography of stores. So each business partner manages between 35 and 40 stores within their particular region. The stores are spread out across Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland for me. So quite a wide geography, which also means different legal jurisdictions as well. And within those 260 stores, within those 7 regions, we employ 30,000 people, which are referred to in Sainsbury's as colleagues. So we've got 30,000 people to keep safe and keep well. And we serve in those stores around about 10 million customers a week. So for one person, which myself, to look after safety and risk for all of those stores, there's no way I could manage safety in all of those stores. Therefore, it's a responsibility of the leadership layer to manage that through the line, because it's their responsibility to manage risk and safety on a day-to-day basis. And my role as a safety business partner is to help them do that. So let's get into a little bit more around what business partnering actually is. So the dictionary definition, depending on which dictionary you look at, would say that business partners bring their expertise, personal impact, and business acumen to functional teams and individual leaders in order to shape and improve, whether that be quality, value, speed, cost, and the delivery of the work done by them. But focus on the purpose of business partnering, and it's to build strong, business-focused, collaborative relationships with the stakeholders to influence and drive business performance. Now, business partnering as a concept dates back to the mid-90s by a gentleman known as Dave Ulrich, who is a professor at the University of Michigan. And he came up with the term business partnering in a HR context, so human resources. And he said that there are many different aspects, and at the time there were 3 aspects to a very effective human resources function. And one of those was the business partner. So you would have other teams that would be in charge of creating policy, other teams that would be in charge of doing payroll, the functional element, but the business partner would integrate within the business function, whether that be an operational division, whether it be an individual location, or with a chief executive, and would provide strategic advice in helping them and their team manage and create a great people strategy. Since the 1990s, the HR business partner has become very common. You'll see them in lots of organizations. But recently, and I'm talking the last kind of 10 years, we've seen business partnering branch out into areas such as finance, so finance business partnering, and more recently, safety and risk business partners. I'm certainly seeing a lot more vacancies out in the field, in the industry for safety, that have the terminology business partner. And when I came into this role that I'm in now, that was the first time that I had encountered a safety business partner. So when I came into it, I wasn't entirely sure what it was and what it meant. So what I've learned over the years is what I'm going to tell you. I'm not an expert in business partnering. There's nothing in this presentation that is going to be fundamentally new to the industry, but what I'm going to share with you is my experience and how I've learned how to perform that role to get the most out of it. If we move on to pulling out the key bits around expertise, personal impact, and business acumen, you can view it as a bit of a Venn diagram of the three things that make up a successful business partner. So let's take these in turn. Business acumen. To truly appreciate the challenges faced by your business partners, whether they be heads of functions, directors, whatever it may be, you need to understand their world. And their world, more often than not, will not be entirely focused on your specialism. So for example, in my role of safety, a regional manager who's managing 35 to 40 stores, their number one priority is not going to be safety. And we need to recognize that, because their number one priority is profitability and making sure that we can grow the business. But that doesn't mean that safety is not important. We just need to acknowledge that actually they've got lots of demands on them as leaders. And by having business acumen and having a base level of knowledge of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that they are being measured and managed on, what that will do is it'll help you contextualize your agenda and help frame things better. So if you're bringing a proposal to change how you do something, maybe it's a new piece of equipment, new personal protective equipment, there will be a cost associated with that, and cost, time, and effort. So you having an awareness of the wider context of the business will help you frame that better and make a better business case. There are certain things that you can do to build your business acumen without actually working in a commercially focused role. So for example, there are lots of organizations that offer a finance for non-finance managers course that give people like me and you an understanding of how profit is calculated, what a good balance sheet looks like, and how particular businesses measure performance. I know a few people within the safety and risk profession that have chosen to do an MBA, so a Master's in Business Administration, that will give them the broader strategic business leadership knowledge that they need to build that business acumen. Other simpler ways of doing it that are a little bit more lighter touch would be to shadow those in operational roles. So, for example, if you want to know more about finance, you could go and shadow someone who works in the finance function to understand what the mechanisms are within their world. The other really important bit is behavioral skills. So the two most important behavioral skills that I see in the business partnering world is impact and influencing and negotiation. Now, impact and influence can apply to many different functions, but within the business partnering world, you have to impact and influence at a variety of levels. So there's the obvious one, which is the level that you're business partnering with, which is typically a senior leadership level, but also those that report into them. So for example, my world, I have 7 business partners, but reporting into those 7 business partners are 260 store managers, and they're the people that actually do the job on a day-to-day basis. So I can influence and have impact at the senior level, but I also need to have a slightly different level of impact at the store manager level. When it comes to negotiation, everything in a business partnering relationship boils down to negotiation, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to influence your agenda in what is going to be a very busy existing agenda, where there are competing demands for that leader's time, for that leader's effort, that leader's impact. So when I go and talk to them about safety, I'm effectively competing with sales, wastage, shrinkage, labor, commercial demands, COVID. So you need to be able to have that negotiation skill to be able to get your agenda across, but also appreciate that, negotiation is about give and take. So going in with an agenda of I need to get my way and it has to be the way that I'm going to suggest, that's the wrong attitude to go in with, and we'll talk about that in a second. And the third and core element would be technical expertise. So you can't be a safety business partner or a risk business partner without having really strong technical expertise in that area to back up your behavioral skills and business acumen. Same for HR, same for finance. So technical is still there, it's still important, but the business partner role really makes sure that it's a balance between that, the business acumen, and the behavioral skills. Hopefully that makes sense. And we're going to build on that in a second by just talking about what business partnering looks like in practice. And this graphic really demonstrates the kind of core elements of what a business partnering relationship looks like. We'll start from the left and work our way across. So collaboration. Business partnering, if you recall, is built on strong, business-focused, collaborative relationships. Now that relies on trust, credibility, and mutual understanding. In order to start a business partnering relationship, one of the most important things to do from day one is contract. So contracting is, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to get the lawyers involved. This is simply just you and your business partner agreeing what your relationship is going to look like. That can include really basic things like how often you're going to speak. What mechanism is it going to be? Is it going to be email? Is it going to be a Teams call? Is it going to be a face-to-face? How often is that going to be? What's on the agenda? Agreeing who is going to be responsible and who's going to be accountable for different aspects of the agenda. And what that allows you to do is then have a term of reference to refer back to as your relationship develops. And as your relationship develops, you'll revisit the contract and just check in. Is it working? Is it effective? Do we need to revisit it? Do we need to adjust it? And I've certainly found that by having a contract with each of my business partners, bearing in mind I've got 7, is a great reference tool for me to kind of go back to every so often and go, right, okay, I agreed to that. Have I done it? And also, what did they agree to? Have they done it? And hold them to account on that in the same way you would hope that they would hold you to account. Performance. So the objective of the relationship is to drive business performance, of which effective risk management is a key building block. So it has to be performance focused in my view. So if I'm looking at a certain aspect of risk and I want to influence a certain agenda, that should have an impact on the overall business performance. So the performance metric that I'm aiming for is the overall impact on bottom line or harm reduction or whatever that may be, rather than focusing on the granularity of the thing you're going to do. And therefore it builds better into the business strategy. Now, planning. So this is about co-creation of plans and strategies. Now that's where risk is incorporated and considered from day one, because as a business partner, you have a seat at the table. And I'll come on and give you an example of this in a second, but if you've got a seat at the table alongside the rest of the operational team, it means that you're not coming along once fully formed plans have already been created and having to rein them back and be seen as a blocker. So if you are involved in the planning stage and the business strategy planning, then risk will be baked in, not bolted on. And I've stolen that from someone, I can't quite remember who said that, but it always sticks with me that it's always better to bake in the risk rather than bolt it on afterwards. Allows you to be a lot more effective. Teamwork. So business partnering has to be a two-way thing. It only works when both parties, you and your business partner, work together towards the same goal, not pulling in opposite directions or saying things opposite to each other to different people. That is probably the trickiest bit to get right in a business partnering relationship. And it goes back to that contracting. So if your contract is solid and you agree that from day one that you're going to be a united front, even if you disagree in a room by yourselves, work it out, but don't undermine each other. I think that's really strong and it helps build trust in the relationship. Synergy, a bit of a corporate buzzword, but put simply, business partnering should result in something that is more than the sum of its parts. So in other words, 1 + 1 equals more than 2. So you've got in a business partner relationship, typically two people, and you're both trying to achieve the same goals at the end of the day, which is business performance. And by working together, you'll be much more effective, and that's where the synergy comes in. Now, success, very simply, successes are those of the team, not the individual. You cannot be an effective business partner if you go into it with an individualist mentality. So you're not going in to win. You're going in to win as a team. You can't go into a relationship and kind of only measure your success on whether you get your way or not, because that is an unhealthy business partnering relationship. And put simply, it ends in win-win. So everyone's a winner in a business partnering relationship. We win as a team, we lose as a team. You need to eradicate the solo mentality, which does exist outside of business partnering in examples I've seen in the past. So hopefully that makes sense. Just to give you an example, when I joined the safety team where I am now, someone who I used to work with in a different team said, I heard you're joining the sales prevention team. And that kind of shocked me a little bit. So I dug into it a little bit, and my team were perceived to historically be a blocker to good ideas. And I believe that's part of the reason why we moved to a business partnering model. Because if we take a scenario, and I like graphics, very visual, a group of people get together, have a wonderful idea, they can see how it's going to grow profits, they spend a lot of time developing a plan, mapping it out, ready to go, and then the safety guy comes along and says, no, you can't do that. Well, no wonder we end up with a bad reputation sometimes. Using the business partnering methodology, the safety person has that seat at the table. So they are there when the idea is generated. They may even come up with the idea. They'll be able to then bake in those risk control measures, help people understand, go on the journey with them, help write the plan. Everyone's a winner. Now, that is a really simplistic way of looking at it, and clearly it never always happens like that. But boil it down to the core fundamentals of, if you're involved from the early stages of something, you will be able to influence the agenda more than coming along at the end and being told that's the way it is. And in your organization, you might not have the ability or the authority to stop things once they've been fully developed. So what you're forced into is coming up with control measures which are not very effective. If you think about the hierarchy of control, throwing in some training in PPE, when actually, had we got involved earlier, we could have actually put engineering controls in, we could have eliminated the risk and put collective control measures in, rather than waiting till we got further down the line when it was fully developed and have to put in individual control measures which fail to danger. So it's a bit of an example where I come from, and I did check in with that person that said sales prevention team about a year ago, and he said, yeah, the perception has changed. So hopefully the tide has turned. Now, just to talk about what business partnering looks like at its best, there's something called the business partnering relationship maturity model, which very simply is some identifiers of what someone looks like in the different stages of business partnering. So you'll see on here, we've got supporter, service provider, business partner. So at the very beginning of the scale, you've got the supporter. Now, this is a function or an individual that will report on technical issues. They'll provide information and data to the business function, but that's pretty much the extent of it. As the relationship matures, you're then looking at more of a service provider. So a service provider will respond to requests. They'll reliably deliver on what they're asked to deliver. They'll be pretty much confined to working within their specialist technical specialism, and they'll wait for invites. So, you know, you'll go to a leadership meeting or an operational meeting when you're asked to. And at the top of the scale there, you've got the business partner, the strategic partner. The strategic partner will adopt the team challenges as their own. So they won't see, oh, we've got a big challenge on sales at the moment. They won't sit back and go, oh, well, that's nothing to do with me. Because at the end of the day, without sales and profit, none of us have a job. So we've all got a part to play in that. They'll contribute across the agenda. So they'll get involved in cross-functional projects, maybe elements that don't have a natural link to their job role, but they will add value. They'll integrate with the team. So often this is kind of referred to as like a dotted line, where they'll report to someone within the safety or risk function, but actually on a day-to-day basis, they'll be part of the team that they're business partnering with. They'll shape people's thinking and behavior proactively without waiting for invite. And they'll lead change. So they'll identify areas where change is required or performance needs to improve, and they will lead that because they have the permission and the authority through their business partner relationship to go and do that. They don't have to go and take a proposal and say, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. What do you think? Business partner relationships work on a kind of a mutual respect basis, that each element of the business partnering relationship will drive that forward. So this has really helped me, and I have kind of lifted this relationship maturity model from a course I attended in my first years as a business partner. There was no course or training that I could go on for safety business partners. So I managed to find a HR business partnering course, looked at the outline of the course and thought, well, that's pretty close to what I need to be doing. It's just a different function. It's just HR. So I went on that course along with a load of other HR business partners, and it was one of the best things I did because it really transformed my thinking. I went into the business partnering role trying to conquer the world, trying to fix everything, and thinking that my agenda was the most important. But by going on this course, understanding relationships, understanding the business acumen, over the subsequent 4 or 5 years that I've spent in this role now, I've managed to move my relationships into that green box around business partnering. The business partner relationships are all different. They're all different individuals that I'm working with, so I can't have them all the same, but I constantly use this model as a little bit of a conscience pricker to check, am I doing the right things? And occasionally I'll find myself slipping into the service provider supporter, and it's that point that I need to, give myself a little pinch and just say, no, you need to get back into that green box, and sense check yourself, and you can revisit the contracting again if you found that your relationship has slipped into that area. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an understanding of business partnering, what it is, how it works in practice. I've not gone into too much of the theoretical detail around the mechanisms of business partnering today, mainly because it's quite in-depth. There's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of theory out there. I would encourage you, if you do want to do a bit more reading, to go and look at the Ulrich model, Ulrich. So that's Dave Ulrich, who coined the term business partnering from a HR context. And even though you may not work in HR, reading his insight and theory from the 90s, and he's refined it over the years into what's called the Ulrich model, has certainly given me great insight into how I should be behaving and responding to the needs of the business as a business partner. So I'm going to stop talking there, and I'm going to take some questions. So Sue, I believe you have been keeping an eye on the chat.
I certainly have, yes. Thank you, Jamie. Thanks, first of all, for a very interesting and informative presentation. We do have a few questions. The first one is, what tips would you give for partnering with multiple partners who all may work differently?
Great question, and something that I'm very familiar with. So as I referred to, I business partner with 7 different people across 3 different nations, and they all do slightly different roles or have different work in different brands across Sainsbury's and Argos, for example. So first of all, the tip I would give would be accept that each relationship will be different, and you will have to flex your style and your approach to suit the individual business partner. I said it before, I'll say it again, contracting is key. So try to establish a baseline for each. For example, if there's a basic thing that you need to get out of every relationship, and it might be, for me, a quarterly risk review. So 1 hour every quarter where we sit down and we go through the risk performance and we agree some objectives. I've put that in as a baseline for all of them. And for some, that's pretty much the extent of our contact, unless it's an emergency, whereas others will have something, we'll meet up for a coffee every period, we'll talk a bit more about stuff, I'll get more involved in certain aspects of their business planning, but you just need to accept that they're not all going to be the same. If you work in a competitive environment where your business partners are, doing the same role but in maybe different areas, and perhaps certainly retail is quite competitive, it's quite an idea to use that competitiveness to your advantage. So for example, if I've done something really good in Scotland and it's really worked, and my business partner in Ireland isn't too keen on it, using that example of, well, we did it in Scotland and it really worked, and that actually might be enough for them to kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, I maybe want a bit of that. So try to use that to your advantage, but there's a balance between competitiveness and trying to play them off against each other. So you've got to be quite, high on your emotional intelligence to be able to pull that off. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you. So obviously this is all to do about relationship building and sort of having those really great relationships between people and emotional intelligence, as you've just mentioned. But what happens if a relationship with a business partner breaks down? How would you deal with that?
Yeah, great question. It does happen. It's not easy. I've been there myself. For me, it's really important to understand the root cause of the breakdown, and then revisiting the contracting process. the contracting process, and sorry to keep harping on about this, but the contract is the foundation of the business partner relationship. So if it breaks down and perhaps the meetings that you've agreed in your contract start getting cancelled, you stop getting invited to meetings, revisit the contract, sit down with the business partner and say, I'm conscious that we're not achieving what we set out to achieve. Can we revisit it and understand where we can go in the right direction? Sometimes it will never be possible to get to perfection. You're never going to have, in my view, 100% relationship with every business partner, especially when you've got more than two or three. It's spinning lots of plates. But what I'd say is don't break your back trying. Sometimes you'll never convince someone to do something, or maybe personality just will clash. But just remember that it takes two to tango, and business partnering is a two-way relationship. So if you're finding that you're constantly having to push your agenda and there's no pull in the other direction, go back to that contracting process and do a bit of a reset on the relationship would be my advice.
Thank you. Quite a long question here, so I'll do my best to read it as quickly as possible. So how should one ensure that business functions are not siloed and not allowed to become fiefdoms, preventing communication of all types of risk and the timely integration of controls?
Interesting question. For me, I've certainly seen this where there's been an effort in a business to move to say 100% business partnering. That's wonderful. However, the risk is that there is nobody central that has a view on everything. And I think that there has to be a balance. And going back to Ulrich's model, his model is that it's like a three-legged stool. I think he's added a fourth leg in recent years, but certainly that there's different aspects that you'd still need to have these central, call them centers of excellence, if you like, that oversee how risk is managed as a whole, as a corporate function. And then it's the business partnering roles that then bring that to life in the individual functional areas. That I think is really important. If you move to 100% business partnering model, the significant risk is that you end up with exactly what the question asker has described, where every individual business function or division is managing risk in a different way, and sometimes may end up competing against each other in the wrong way. So I would suggest that there has to be a central functional oversight, which determines how we manage risk as a business. It's then up to the business partners to bring that to life and make it relevant to the individual functions.
Thank you. Next question is, I'm not in a business partnering role. How could I incorporate some of the elements of business partnering into my role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are definitely elements of the business partnering model that could be incorporated into a risk or safety manager or advisor function. I would start by revisiting the Venn diagram of the business acumen, behavioral skills and technical expertise, and try to develop outside of the technical into the behavioral and the business. So easy ways to do that: build an awareness of the business performance. Read your annual report, and I don't mean the fluffy bit at the beginning. I mean go and read the financials, the balance sheet, understand your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortizations. Understand the health financially of your business, because that's what motivates stakeholders and shareholders. When you're making recommendations, because even if you're not in a business partnering role, at some point you'll be making recommendations or proposals, or suggesting controls in a risk assessment, is to frame those recommendations and proposals in a business context. So use that business acumen and thread that in. It makes it more relevant to someone. Look for opportunities to add value in areas outside your specialism. So if there's a project happening on sales growth or security or whatever it is, it might be slightly outside your specialism. Look to see if you can add value to that and get involved, and that will help build credibility in your awareness with your stakeholders. And if you're really interested in it, read into business partnering. Most of the literature you'll find is around HR and finance. There's maybe a couple, 2 or 3 articles, either in the Sentinel magazine or through IOSH or different areas that have talked about it, but nobody's really talked about it in depth. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this topic when IIRSM asked me to do this webinar, because I felt it's an area that doesn't get talked about enough within safety. So for example, I went on the HR business partnering course, which was a 2 or 3 day course specifically for HR business partners, but I got so much value out of that. So if you really wanted to learn about it and maybe think of that as a future career move, then that's a great way to get into it.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm just checking if we've got any more questions. And I don't think we have, so I think we'll leave it there for today. I just wanted to say thank you again for sharing your knowledge with us, and thank you to everybody else who's joined in with the webinar today. Thank you for your questions as well. The recording will be on the YouTube channel either later today or tomorrow, so you'll be able to catch up or recap on anything that you've missed in your own time. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. Thank you again, Jamie, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.